They told you money was simple. You work, you earn, you save, and if you're smart, it grows. What they didn't tell you is that for thousands of years, money has been carefully engineered, manipulated in back rooms, rewritten in crises, redesigned after every disaster. The biggest secret isn't a hidden vault or a lost treasure. The biggest secret is that the money you trust is built on rules you were never meant to fully understand. You're watching Hidden Finance, where we pull back the curtain on the systems that quietly run your life. Today, we're traveling through 5,000 years of financial history, across empires, wars, crashes, and revolutions to uncover how money really works, who controls it, and why its next evolution may already be here. From clay tablets and gold coins to central banks and digital ledgers, we'll expose the truths that were buried beneath laws, jargon, and complexity, and explore the future technology that could rewrite the rules again. This isn't just a story about economics. It's a story about power, control, and the tools that decide who wins and who never even had a chance. Before there were dollars, pounds, or yen, there was something far more primitive: trust. In ancient Mesopotamia, long before coins existed, farmers carved promises into clay tablets, records of grain owed, wages to be paid, debts to be settled. Money began not as metal, but as memory, a public ledger written in mud. Barter worked for simple trades, but when societies grew, barter broke. You couldn't split a cow into 3 loaves of bread. So people invented something new: tokens that could stand in for value and outlive the moment of the deal. Then came a turning point on the plains of Lydia, in what is now Turkey. Around 600 BC, for the first time, rulers stamped pieces of precious metal with a seal, guaranteeing weight and purity. Coins were born, and with them an invisible power, the authority to decide what counted as money. The hidden truth appeared immediately: whoever controlled the mint could quietly tax the population by shaving a little metal off the edge, mixing in cheaper alloys, or declaring new coins worth more than their contents. Money was no longer just a tool of trade. It had become a weapon of the state. The pattern repeated across civilizations. In Rome, emperors facing war and debt debased the silver denarius, replacing precious metal with cheaper base metals, even as they pretended nothing had changed. Prices rose, trust eroded, soldiers demanded more pay, the first great inflation spirals of history. On paper, the coin looked the same. In reality, the value was dissolving. Centuries later, you would recognize this pattern with a different name: inflation. As Europe emerged from the Middle Ages, another revolution unfolded quietly in the counting rooms of Italian city-states. Families like the Medici pioneered double-entry bookkeeping, a system that tracked assets and liabilities, credits and debits, with a precision that bordered on magic for its time. Merchants could now extend credit across oceans, fund voyages, and finance kings without ever moving a chest of gold. Depositors believed their money was in the bank, but in truth, most of it had been lent out, multiplied, transformed into bets on the future. Here lies another hidden truth: banks don't just store money, they manufacture it through credit. By the late 1600s, a new institution appeared: the modern central bank. In 1694, the Bank of England was created, not to help ordinary citizens, but to solve a problem for the crown. It needed money to wage war against France. Investors lent gold and silver to the bank, and in return, the bank issued paper notes, backed by those metals and supported by royal charter. This was the birth of national paper money, promises to pay, guaranteed by the state, managed by a single powerful institution. From that moment, money became a triangle of power: governments, bankers, and the people caught between them. By the 19th century, much of the world had converged on what seemed like the perfect system: the gold standard. Currencies were officially redeemable for a fixed amount of gold, and nations agreed to keep their promises. To the public, this felt safe, disciplined, almost moral. As good as gold became a phrase of absolute trust. But behind the scenes, banks were still lending out more claims on gold than the gold they actually held. The system worked only as long as most people never asked for their gold back at the same time. When World War I erupted, that illusion cracked. Governments suspended gold's convertibility, printed money to pay for war, and told their citizens it was temporary, an emergency it rarely is. The 1920s and 1930s exposed the fragility of this monetary architecture, speculation, credit booms, market crashes, and finally, the Great Depression. When panic hit and people rushed to get their money out, banks collapsed, and the nice, tidy story of backed money fell apart. In the United States, President Franklin D. Roosevelt took an extraordinary step in 1933. He forced citizens to turn in their gold to the government, under threat of fines and prison. Gold ownership was effectively criminalized for regular Americans, even as the government quietly raised the price of gold afterward, capturing the hidden gain. Your right to hold the hardest form of money had just been revoked, in the name of stabilizing the system. The message was clear: when survival of the monetary order is at stake, your individual ownership is negotiable. The hidden truth was no longer subtle. Money was whatever the authorities said it was, whenever they chose to say it. After World War II, the world tried to reset the rules in a New Hampshire hotel called Bretton Woods. Delegates from 44 nations agreed on a new system. The US dollar would be pegged to gold at $35 an ounce, and other currencies would peg themselves to the dollar. In theory, this anchored the world to something real, something finite. In practice, it created a single point of dominance. The United States could print dollars that other countries needed, and as long as foreign governments believed in the promise of gold convertibility, the game continued. The dollar became not just America's money, but the world's reserve currency. But promises have limits. By the 1960s, the US was spending heavily on war and social programs, printing more dollars than it could possibly redeem in gold. Foreign governments, led by France, started asking for the metal itself, calling in the check. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon went on television and calmly announced that the US would temporarily suspend dollar convertibility into gold. The age of money backed by something tangible was over. The era of pure fiat had begun. Fiat money is simple in definition, but profound in consequence. It has value because the government says it does, and because you believe others will accept it. There is no hard limit, no metal constraint, only political will and public trust. From the 1970s onward, central banks and commercial banks had unprecedented freedom to create money through debt. When a bank makes you a loan, it doesn't hand you someone else's savings. It creates a new deposit out of thin air, balanced by your promise to repay. Your money, your savings, your pension, your salary is woven into a vast network of IOUs. The result was explosive growth and repeated crises. Between the 1980s and the early 2000s, the world saw wave after wave of booms and busts: Latin American debt, Asian financial crisis, dot-com bubble. But nothing compared to 2008. Banks had bundled risky mortgages into complex securities, stamped them as safe, and sold them around the world, all on a mountain of leverage made possible by that flexible, credit-driven money system. When U.S. housing prices fell, the structure collapsed, and the global financial system teetered on the edge of oblivion. To prevent total collapse, central banks created unprecedented sums of money in a matter of months. Trillions of dollars appeared on balance sheets through a process politely called quantitative easing. The public was told this was technical, temporary, necessary, just a stabilizing tool. In reality, a new precedent was established. Whenever the system is threatened, new money can be summoned, and the costs, usually inflation and asset bubbles, can be quietly pushed onto savers and future generations. Once again, the hidden truth of modern money revealed itself. Gains are privatized, losses socialized, and the rules can be rewritten mid-game. So what exactly did they hide? Not a single villain in a smoke-filled room, but a set of structural truths. That your bank deposit is not a box of cash, but a fragile promise. That inflation quietly erodes your purchasing power, functioning as an invisible tax without a vote. That those closest to the source of new money, governments, large banks, major asset owners, tend to benefit long before that money trickles down to you, and that the story you were told that money is neutral, objective, and fair has rarely matched reality. But every system, no matter how entrenched, creates its own opposition. In the 1990s and early 2000s, a group of programmers and cryptographers, often called cypherpunks, asked a radical question: what if money could exist without a central authority at all? In 2008, as the global financial system was melting down, someone using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published a white paper describing Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It combined old ideas, cryptography, game theory, digital signatures, into something new, a decentralized ledger that anyone could verify but no one could unilaterally control. For the first time, scarcity existed natively on the internet. Bitcoin set strict rules coded into its very DNA. Only 21 million coins would ever exist, released on a predictable schedule that no central bank could override. New coins would be minted not by decree, but by miners competing with computing power to secure the network. Every transaction would be recorded publicly on a blockchain, an open ledger visible to anyone. This was money as protocol, not policy. In a world of flexible fiat, Bitcoin was a digital form of hard money, volatile, controversial, but immune to the printing press. From that foundation, an entire ecosystem of crypto and blockchain technology emerged. Ethereum introduced the idea of smart contracts code that could hold and move value automatically when conditions were met. Without banks or lawyers in the middle, decentralized finance, or DeFi, began offering lending, trading, and interest-earning tools built from open-source code, accessible with nothing more than a smartphone and an internet connection. Stablecoins like USDC and USDT bridged old and new, representing dollars on a blockchain, moving across borders in minutes instead of days. The core idea was simple but revolutionary. What if finance was a set of open, programmable services instead of a maze of institutions? Yet the existing powers did not stand still. Central banks began exploring their own response: central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. These are not cryptocurrencies in the Wild West sense. They are digital versions of national currencies, issued and controlled by the state, potentially programmable to the tiniest detail. In a CBDC world, a government could, in theory, send stimulus directly to individual wallets, set expiry dates on money to encourage spending, or restrict certain transactions entirely. The same technology that promises transparency and efficiency could also create the most powerful financial surveillance system in history. This is the crossroads where we now stand. On one side, open networks, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other permissionless systems offer an escape hatch from centralized control, but come with their own risks, speculation, scams, and extreme volatility. On the other, state-backed digital currencies promise stability and convenience, but concentrate power more than ever before. Layered on top of both is a new force: artificial intelligence. AI is already trading markets, allocating credit, detecting fraud. Soon, it may help run entire financial systems, making decisions faster than any human can follow. Imagine a future where your bank is an app, your paycheck arrives in programmable tokens, and your savings are held in a basket of digital assets managed by an AI. Loans could be priced in real time based on your behavior, social graph, and transaction history. Taxes might be deducted automatically at the moment of each transaction, with no room for error or escape. At the same time, you could hold a portion of your wealth in assets no government can freeze, moving across borders at the speed of information. The line between money, data, and identity is blurring, and once it's gone, it won't come back. Will this future tech replace it all? In truth, money rarely disappears. It mutates. Gold never vanished. It moved from coins to vaults. Cash didn't die. It shrank in importance as digital balances took over. Similarly, banks, central banks, blockchains, and AI will likely coexist in a messy, contested system where each tries to capture your trust and your dependency. The real revolution is not just in code or cryptography, but in awareness. For centuries, the mechanics of money were cloaked in complexity, reserved for priests of finance and policymakers behind closed doors. Now, with a few clicks, you can study how money is created, track flows on public blockchains, and move value outside of traditional gatekeepers. You may not be able to control the system, but you no longer have to be blind to it, and that changes everything. The truth about money is that it has always been a story, a shared hallucination backed by power, belief, and technology. The next chapter will be written not just by governments and banks, but by coders, entrepreneurs, and ordinary people choosing which systems to trust. You can cling to the old story, embrace the new, or live in both worlds at once, but you can no longer pretend the rules haven't changed. Because once you see how money really works, you can never unsee it. You've been watching Hidden Finance, where we expose the secrets behind the numbers, the history behind the headlines, and the systems shaping your financial future. If you're ready to keep digging into the truths they'd rather you never question, stay with us, because the next hidden chapter of money is only just beginning.